Let's talk about my zero-note strategy. Summarizing, highlighting, and rereading are poor studying strategies. At the beginning of medical school, I was overwhelmed by the amount of information and needed to change my study strategy. What followed was an all-encompassing reworking of how I spent my time. The results, my grades went up and I studied less. How is that possible? In this chapter, I will show you how I take zero notes in medical school and score better and study less. The core of this strategy is active recall, spaced repetition, and practice testing. These are my three pillars for studying. My entire strategy revolves around these three. I avoid at all costs highlighting, rereading, underlining, or summarizing. In one sentence, plan, preview, view, review, test, and repeat. Let's plan. Every week, the week before what I'm learning, I write down. What classes do I have on Monday? What laboratory will I have on Tuesday? I need to know what I will be going into so I can plan my studies accordingly. Then I plan to study that information the day before class. Why are we doing this? Well, the evidence supports it. A good night's sleep consolidates and optimizes our memories or our studying from the day. When I show up to class with no knowledge on the subject, the information has a chance to just go completely over my head. So using my school as an example, Tuesday I have a lecture on the layers of the skin. So Monday I will plan to teach myself about the layers of the skin. Have a good night's sleep Monday and show up to Tuesday with that skin knowledge in my brain. So why don't I just plan out my entire semester? Well, I have found looking and planning that far into the future is difficult. You may be busier one week than another, or life just happens. A week seems the perfect amount of time for me to plan. I know what I will be learning that week. I know I will be studying that information the day before lectures. Is there anything else? One thing that has dramatically impacted my stress levels is the night before writing out a detailed plan of what I will be doing the next day on a little Post-it note. Then I just place that Post-it note right on my computer, and the next day I proceed through the tasks. I only focus on the next lesson, the next thing on my Post-it note until I can cross it off. So we know what we are going to study, but how do we actually study? Let's preview the material. So the day before the lecture, I preview the information. How exactly do I do that? Well, get a general idea of what the lecturer is trying to teach us. Maybe it's about disorders of systole, which is a part of functioning of the heart. What is systole? What are heart valves involved in systole? What is happening to blood pressure during systole? Then I learn all the terms. For example, I may not know what chordae tendineae are, so I will look that up and then make a flashcard for it. Or not, depending on how relevant I think it is. Mainly, I just want to understand the terms. The next step is to watch a summary video. I find a video that matches the general theme of the lecture content is pretty good. There are specific resources I use for medical school, but for any other subject, I'm sure YouTube has something on it. Or read the chapter of the book once. During this video, I do not take notes. I just try and understand what is going on in the overall subject. Could I explain the topic that I'm learning about to one of my friends if they asked? I try and do it. This helps confirm or deny whether I have a grasp of the information. Remember the Feynman technique. Then I create relevant flashcards. This is where the magic happens. Start testing yourself right away by creating flashcards using an app called Anki. And then Anki will space out this information when you need to be retested on it using a built-in algorithm. So I want to give you some points on creating these flashcards when you create flashcards during these lectures. Don't memorize, understand. When I first started using flashcards, I fell into the trap of memorization. I would show up to a test and realize I didn't know how the heart pumped or why someone may have aortic regurgitation. Instead, I had memorized silly facts, like what gene mutation may cause something called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and I didn't know what hypertrophic cardiomyopathy was. This little fact is important, but the big idea, what the heart is more important. The next tip I have when you're making your flashcards is limit the number of cards you make. If you make a card for absolutely every piece of information, you will never get through them all, and you will much more easily fall into the trap of memorization. Using a supplemental deck is especially helpful as you'll be doing pre-made cards and your cards. In fact, with the pre-made decks I have, I barely make any new cards at all. Maybe 2 a day from incorrect practice questions or something like that, but the pre-made deck is a game changer. The next thing I do is I make sure the cards I'm learning aren't already in my pre-made deck. For example, I use a pre-made deck in medical school. Most of the information is already in this deck. There are only a few school-specific things that I need to learn. So after previewing a topic, I usually find flashcards already made in this deck. The next thing I do is I view. On lecture day, I show up and I watch. I just sit there. I pay attention, I ask questions, I'm involved, and I'm interested. Usually someone, if not you, is spending a good amount of money for you to be experiencing what you're experiencing right now. And as the teacher or presenter is going through the slides 2 or 3 times during the lecture, I'll try and think, okay, what did I just learn? Could I create a question based on that content? Could I explain what I just learned to a friend? And then I use this magical app called Anki, as we talked about before, during a lecture or shortly after to make flashcards about what I just learned. Now I've viewed the information, I want to review the information. So the day after the lecture, I will review the flashcards I made. I don't need to plan out the timing or anything like that because Anki does it for me. Anki is magic. Oh yeah, I will rarely, if ever, look at that lecture again. Remember how lousy rereading is? Sure, if I don't understand something on a flashcard, I may go back to that lecture, the source material, to make sure I know what is going on, but that is the only exception. Once I've gotten a handle on the lecture material, I do those practice questions. And if I get a question wrong, I make a flashcard based on that question. Bam! Now I will never get that question wrong again. Now I have my lecture and Anki combo working like a well-oiled machine. How do we kick it up a notch? What do I do that really started improving my grades? Remember the paper about improving students' study techniques? Well, they found practice testing and distributed practice, or spaced repetition, to be the highest utility techniques compared to all 8 other study techniques. Repeat this process across all of your classes, and you will improve. I know I did, but this is not easy. I almost know how well it works because it feels like my brain is just working harder on flashcards and practice questions than when I just scroll through a slideshow or read a chapter in a textbook. So use the Pomodoro method and get to work. What might an average day look like? So first thing, wake up and I do all of my flashcards. Then I attend or watch lecture. Then I review that lecture material with Anki. And then I do some practice questions. And then thankfully I take a break. But remember, we got more lectures coming up tomorrow. So I will preview tomorrow's lecture material. And then I'll go to bed.